So how do you overcome Catholic guilt? Good morning, my friends. It's I, Jhon, out here on the back deck on an overcast day. It obviously rained a little bit earlier. The ground's all wet. Beautiful mug of coffee. I hope you're doing well today. It's a Sunday today, so I thought I'd come on and make a video for the Recovering Catholic channel. You know, one of the most prevalent things that I run into when I'm doing my private sessions with people is the concept of Catholic guilt. People struggle with the guilt and the anxiety that they've been raised in the faith of Catholicism. They've been raised in guilt, anxiety, stress. I mean, they've been told they're born in original sin. They've been told that Jesus went to the cross for them, that, you know, that it was their sins that caused him to suffer, that we were born in sin, that we are sinners, that we're wretches, and that we are just unworthy. And when you look at living a joyful life in the here and now, to think of yourself in such a way would absolutely 100% make you struggle with living that way or living that joyfully. When you look at the idea of Catholic guilt, there's a couple ways to break free of this cycle. The first is to, first of all, ask yourself which version of God you subscribe to. Are you subscribed to the Old Testament vengeful and jealous God that's going to judge you? Or do you lean into or subscribe to the God of the New Testament and the God of the book of Jhon? God is love. And, you know, being part of that one God, the Father and I are one, and you must become one with me as I'm with the Father. It really comes down to you breaking out of the contradictions that are found in the Bible. So Einstein said the most important decision you ever make will be if you live in a friendly or an unfriendly universe. And it's a matter of your choice of whether it's a friendly or an unfriendly universe. And overcoming Catholic guilt has a lot to do with exactly that. Do I believe in a vengeful, jealous God or a loving God? And if God is truly loving, would a loving God make you feel unworthy, unloved, a wretch, call you names, blame you for the death of their son? You know, is that love? Is that love? No, that's subjugation. That's power over you. That's a hierarchy. The Father and I are one, and you must become one with me as I am with the Father. If you look at it from the perspective of, if God is love and the Father and I are one, just like I'm one with Jeshua, Jesus, well, then I am love as well. And if I am love as well, then I wouldn't have done those things that I'm being blamed for, even though I wasn't even there 2,000 years ago. And I've got to come to the place of realizing that everything is in the now. You know, whatever you ask in God's name is granted. God's name, according to Moses, is I am. I am. And I am one with God. And I am is the present moment declaration of your oneness. The question you have to ask yourself is, are you a vengeful and jealous God? Or are you a loving God? Well, a vengeful and jealous God is one of guilt, shame, struggle, anxiety. Those belief systems come from the ideas of fear. And there's love, there's fear. And if you jump out of Catholicism and look over at Buddhism, he says the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And even the Sufis in Islam say that God's on one side of the veil and we're on the other side of the veil, and our life is the struggle against the veil, and the veil is our fear. And the book of Psalms in the Bible says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Well, that idea of fearing no evil means that the negative connotations that a vengeful and jealous God would inflict upon you is something you should not fear. Because the Bible itself tells you that. Buddha himself told you that. The Sufis tell you that. It's this balance of fear. Guilt is the fear of not being loved. Guilt is the fear of being wrong. Guilt is simply fear. And the guilt of Catholicism is given to you as a child. And you learn that process, and you learn to be afraid, and you learn that you're a sinner, and you've learned that you were born that way with original sin. You've been told that you're a wretch, just even in the songs, saved a wretch like me, right? All of that is the indoctrination of a religion that in itself has conflict. It has the conflict of the Old Testament and the New Testament gods, which are different. And even in the New Testament, there are stories that conflict with one another all the way through it. There's 3 versions of the walking on water story. There's 2 versions of the death of Judas. There's just multiple contradictions all the way through the entire Bible. Even more so with the original text, because the original texts were not written together to be a book. The book didn't happen until after the Nicene Council. When the Nicene Council was when they started talking about the doctrines of the church and creating it. But that was 325 years later. That wasn't anything to do with the time and life of Jeshua. And so it comes down to, am I going to be guilty and go through life as a guilty sinner based upon something that was compiled 300 years after the time of the person that I follow? And am I going to also lean into the concept of this book being infallible or fallible? Now, we know it's fallible. We know it's flawed all the way through it. There's so many contradictions. Bible scholars will tell you even the first book of the Bible, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, come from 2 different source texts, and they're in the wrong order. So this idea that you're holding on to guilt from doctrines from 2,000 years ago that weren't even compiled as a doctrine then, and then were compiled as a doctrine later to fit a narrative, this guilt that you're carrying is because of that choice to be locked into those inconsistent doctrines. I believe God is love. I totally believe that. I also totally believe that God being love and me being part of God, I am in the process of just delivering love into the world. And if I were to take my time to focus on delivering love in the world instead of thinking about how terrible I am, then I would be creating God into the world, because God is love. So the way you overcome your own personal guilt of Catholicism, your Catholic guilt, is number 1, make some serious decisions. Is God love or is God fearful? No. Is the book infallible or is it flawed? Are the contradictions a sign that I am following something that's unstable, that has no real solid foundation beneath it? When you look at it from this perspective, you very quickly discover that it's almost sheer folly to follow the doctrines of Catholicism to the letter, because the letters are changing, and the letters are consistently changing. I remember when I was a child, we couldn't eat meat on Fridays. Now it's only during Lent. I remember that we talked about limbo. We don't talk about limbo anymore. Unbaptized children go to limbo. Think about that. Would a loving God send unbaptized children to limbo, a place that has neither heaven or hell? What did that child ever do? Is God that vengeful and jealous because that child wasn't subjugated when they had no choice? It makes no sense. That original sin idea. I don't know any parent in the world who held their child for the first time and looked down and said, "Oh, what a nasty sinner." I don't know any parent who ever did that. But the next thing they did was they got scared and they're, oh my God, we got to save his soul. So we take him to the church and we indoctrinate him into the Catholic faith. And then as we raise them up through the Catholic faith, we teach them that they're sinners, they're born in sin, they do bad things, they're unworthy, that Jesus died for our sins, and that we are just bad people that are being saved by these mystical beings above us. And when you look at it from that perspective, I think God is too big, too beautiful to be encompassed by such a fear-based construct. I think God is love. I meet people who are, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Baha'i, Wicca, atheists, and if I see them as a loving person and I see them doing loving things, I think they found God. I think that God is too big to be encompassed by one school of thought or religion, especially one that the majority of the world is falling away from. Christian churches have lost 54% of their congregations in the past 20 years. Right now on earth, 30% of the world claims to be Christian. Less than half of those are practicing Christians. 85% of the world is not a practicing Catholic or Christian. The majority of the world doesn't believe that, but the people who are indoctrinated into the Catholic faith believe they're guilty, believe they're sinners, believe they're bad, believe they're guilty. And 85% of the world doesn't think that way. And it comes down to overcoming Catholic guilt is you making choices. You making personal choices for your own belief systems. If you believe God is love, then you're not guilty. If you believe God is compassion, you're not guilty. If you believe like the Dalai Lama believes, and he said his religion is simple, his religion is kindness, then you're not guilty. If you believe what the Prophet Muhammad says, he who knows not kindness has no faith. He literally is saying, if you're not kind, you are not loving, you're not faithful to God. It comes back to the idea that you have to make these conscious choices for yourself. Now, here's the interesting part about that. Conscious choices are only made in the only moment that you're ever conscious, and that's your present moment. The past is done. There's nothing back there that's changeable. The future's not set. It's just something that's sitting there waiting for you to make your creation in. It's substance waiting for your creation, your belief. What you think you become, you create your world. As a man thinketh, so is he. So take your present moment, the only conscious moment you have, and make a choice. And begin living into that choice. And what happens is the more you live into that choice, the more you begin to see the loving world surround you. And the more that loving world surrounds you, the more your past gets filled with this loving experience. And then all of that Catholic guilt that is housed in your subconscious belief dissipates. It gets less and less and less the more you stay present and stay loving and believe that you are just being a loving and kind being. Next thing you know, you're not going to have guilt because you're going to look back in your past. You're going to see all these beautiful, loving things you've done. You're going to see all these beautiful, loving things that show that you are part of God. God is love. Be loving, and there's nothing else to be guilty. The Father and I are one, and you must become one with me as I am with the Father. You must become one with Jesus as he is with the Father, which is you becoming one with God because they're one. And you're one. Come to this oneness of God and recognize that if God is love and you're one with God, then you must be loved too. And there's no fear-based guilt or dogmas of subjugation that you are subject to. You did nothing wrong. That baby being held did nothing wrong. You were the baby. And now, in this world, you're living into a beautiful life because you've chosen to in the I am moment. God's name is I am, according to Moses. And you get to, I am is also a present moment declaration, and you get to take that present moment declaration and direct the love of God and be it in the now. That doesn't mean you're not worthy. That means you have all the worthiness. You are completely worthy. And so release the idea of Catholic guilt because it makes no sense in God. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.